You're listening to episode number 14 of Overprescribed. Welcome to Overprescribed, the show that raises America's awareness on pharmaceutical medications in this country, all in an effort to help you, the everyday consumer, to live the safest, healthiest, and most informed medication experience possible. Okay, on today's show, we're talking about the 3 things at a minimum that I think everyone should know about new, or as they also call them, novel medicines. So these are medicines that are brand new on the market. They've never been out there in the market. You've never heard of them before. So this is very different than drug company A taking, say, one of their drug products that's meant to treat rheumatoid arthritis, for example, and then 5 years down the line, going through clinical trials, submitting data and application to the FDA to now sell and market the drug for also treating headaches based on clinical trials proving that the drug is also safe and effective to treat that as well. So new or novel medications have never been on the market before. And I want everyone to know about these drugs because these drugs come with a certain degree of risk. And luckily, there's information out there at your fingertips that you can use to fully inform yourself, or at least to moderately inform yourself about these medications before you take the first dose. So let's start with the first thing I think that everyone should know about new or novel medicines. First and foremost, these new or novel medications are captured in the FDA's drug trial snapshots. Now, you may have heard me talk about these drug trial snapshots in previous episodes when we first launched. And the reason being is because these very user-friendly glimpses, if you will, of a new drug are always available to the public. Now, they're not always released in real time when a drug is approved. And I have a few examples for you we'll get into after I go through my 3 top things everyone should know about new novel medication list. But I have seen these drug trial snapshots released usually within a few days or a few weeks of a new drug approval. Okay, so the drug trial snapshots, definitely take a look at those, and I'll talk more about those before we end this episode as well. 2, the second thing I think everyone should know about new or novel medicines that are just now being released on the market is that you can go beyond the drug trial snapshot. That's right. You can look even further than that. And I'm going to give you all these resources. So there's not only the new drug trial snapshot, but there's also the FDA's approval letter. Now, in the approval letter and other approval documentation, you may find other information about how the clinical trial went and more details about some of the safety concerns of the new drug. Okay. And this could be really helpful for people who are especially information hogs. Some of us want as much information as possible before not only taking a medicine we've never taken for the first time, but especially a medicine we've never taken for the first time that just hit the market. Especially if this is a drug that may be indicated for pediatric populations, for example. So I know a lot of parents sometimes want to make sure that the medicines that we're giving our children are very safe and effective, but incredibly safe more than anything else. So you can dig deeper than just the drug trial snapshot, which, by the way, those drug trial snapshots are not available for every single medication that's out there on the market today. These drug trial snapshots have only been in play since I think 2015, but they're here to stay, I believe. I hope they're here to stay. And I think they're still really good summaries of information for people to take a look at. Okay. And the third and final thing I think that everyone should know about a new or novel medication is that when these drugs are released or approved, they are based on clinical trial data. And these clinical trials may have gone on for however many years, but the point that I'm really trying to make is that those clinical trials are normally represented or conducted on a small set of patients. We're talking hundreds of patients. And those hundreds of patients may not be truly representative of the people who will be prescribed the drug in the real world or after the drug is approved. So you may have a drug that was tested on 400 people. It's approved based on that one trial of 400 people. And once it's approved, it's now going to be exposed to hundreds of thousands or millions of potential patients and consumers all across America. So what I'm saying is that one thing you need to know about new drugs, newer novel medicines on the market, is not only that it's been tested on a small set of people and it's been in a controlled environment, but we also, because of that, may not have a very good understanding on the full safety profile until it hits the market. So new drugs are risky because we may not know completely exactly how it would behave in the broader population once it starts getting out there and being prescribed by thousands of doctors and healthcare professionals all around the country. So new drugs, new or novel medications come with that risk. Okay. Now, speaking of new and novel medicines, I want to now take an opportunity to talk about 3 drug trial snapshots. So we'll dig a little bit deeper in together. 3 drug trial snapshots that were just released this week. Now, we did tweet about this earlier in the week, very quick little snippet of it, but this is going to go in a little bit more detail on these 3 drugs that were just released through new drug trial snapshots. So let's dig in. Up first are 2 drugs that were approved on June 27th of this year, and both manufactured by a drug company by the name of Array Biopharma. And those 2 new drugs are called MEKTOVI, which also goes by the name binimetinib, and BRAFTOVI, which also goes by the name encorafenib. Now, MEKTOVI, just so you know, in case you're listening to this while you're driving or cooking, MEKTOVI is spelled MEKTOVI. That's the brand name for the one drug. And BRAFTOVI is spelled BRAFTOVI. Okay. Now, MEKTOVI and BRAFTOVI are 2 of the newest drugs to hit the market to treat melanoma, which is a type of skin cancer. Now, according to the Skin Cancer Foundation, an estimated 178,560 new cases of melanoma will be diagnosed this year, and about 9,320 people will die of melanoma this year. And women aged 49 and under are more likely to develop melanoma than any other cancer except breast and thyroid cancers. The American Academy of Dermatology estimates that an average or an estimate of 1 million people in the U.S. are living with melanoma as I speak. Now, the FDA's drug trial snapshots on these 2 drugs are 2 separate snapshots, but they're pretty much showing the same thing since the same trial was used to support the drug approvals for each of these drugs. Now, according to the drug trial snapshots that I printed out from the FDA website, these drugs were approved based on one clinical trial of 383 patients with the BRAF, that's capital BRAF, the BRAF V600 mutation positive melanoma that was advanced or could not be removed by surgery. The trial was conducted in 162 sites in Europe, North America, and what the snapshot calls various countries around the world. Okay, so a total of 162 sites spread across those countries or regions. These drugs are combination drugs meant to be used together. That's right. So the indication is to use them together. Now, these drugs are also indicated and meant to delay disease worsening. And apparently the trial found that 63% of patients experienced complete or partial shrinkage of their tumors. Okay, so 63%. Regarding how well the drug worked in clinical trials among sex, race, and age, according to the drug trial snapshot, it was determined that it worked similarly in men and women with regards to age, and it worked in patients younger and older than 65 years of age. But, and this is where it gets interesting, this is based on the patients that were able to be included in this trial, because with regards to race, the majority of patients were white, and the number of patients of other races was limited, therefore not allowing for any differences in racial groups to be determined. Specifically, the snapshot reports 348 patients were classified as white, 13 as Asian, 7 as other, 15 as unknown, and 2 as missing data. Now, there were 0 characterized as Black or African American. Maybe there's some story or history or other information to gather from those patients classified as other, unknown, or have missing data. But the bottom line is that there's no definitive classification of any Black or African American patients being included in this trial. And it's a troubling fact that I wanted to mention, since melanoma affects all races. And while it definitely affects whites more, I think the number is something like 1 in 38 that I read. It also impacts Black or African American populations. And I think that number is more like 1 in 1,000. With regards to the 5-year survival rate of melanoma for whites diagnosed with melanoma, it is greater than 90%. But the survival rate for African Americans is much lower, and it's around 69%. That's a big difference. Now, that survival rate deserves some further explanation, and I will include in the show notes an article from self.com that did a relatively good job in explaining the backstory there. But in general, from what I gathered from that article, that survival rate is lower in African Americans because African American or Black patient populations tend to be diagnosed at a later stage. So they're catching the cancer at a later stage. And part of that is due to Blacks being more susceptible to the least common subtype of melanoma, which can be hard to identify and diagnose. Okay, anyway, again, I'll add the Self article in the show notes. Okay, I've talked about these drug trial snapshots in prior episodes of Overprescribed, and they are truly snapshots. Again, they're user-friendly, but they're glimpses. There's tiny, tiny glimpses, really, into what led to this drug approval, showing you some information, basic information about the findings from the clinical trial that allowed for this drug to be approved by the FDA or supported the drug approval. And these are good. I'd rather these exist than not. However, honestly, these snapshots are barely scratching the surface well enough for a patient to make the most informed decision on whether or not to take a medication with great confidence that the benefits will outweigh the negative risk based on the clinical trial. So again, as I said, when you're taking a new or novel medicine, it's worthwhile to dig deeper for information from your healthcare provider. There's information provided by the pharmaceutical companies, and there's information out there on the FDA's website, as well as other information, whether it's on YouTube, patient forums. The information is out there. Now, speaking of that, let's get back to the other information in the drug trial snapshot about MEKTOVI and BRAFTOVI. Now, according to the snapshot, the possible side effects are a bit different between the two drugs. So even though these drugs are meant to be used together, a bit different. According to the snapshots, the possible side effects for MEKTOVI when using the drug in combination with BRAFTOVI include heart failure, blood clots, muscle, eye, and liver damage, bleeding, and lung inflammation. The possible side effects when using BRAFTOVI in combination with MEKTOVI include new skin cancers, bleeding, eye inflammation, and heart rhythm problems due to QT prolongation. So in general, side effects from MEKTOVI and BRAFTOVI are all very serious, apparently, and I'm sure unwanted side effects for any person. But I'm mentioning these because, one, I want you to be fully informed of what are the possibilities if you were to take these new drugs and did not have a chance to read the drug trial snapshots. And I want you to know what to possibly expect. And as consumers, that's our job, right? To be as informed as possible. We have to be. Now, depending on what you're going through with your melanoma diagnosis, you may make a decision to take these new drugs, and that's your personal decision and right to do so. But pay attention to your body and report your side effects always. Now, I wish that the drug trial snapshots included the percentage of people who received those side effects, or even a list of every single side effect observed, because, of course, these snapshots are not capturing, they're not all inclusive in an exhaustive list of the side effects that were observed in the clinical trial. But the snapshot is what it is for now. Some of the ways I thought it would be pretty cool to dig a little deeper on these two new drug approvals was to take a look at the FDA approval letter, and second, to take a look at the clinical trial summary, which should always be posted on clinicaltrials.gov before these drugs are ever approved by the FDA. Now, when looking at the official approval letter from the FDA to the drug manufacturer, at least for MEKTOVI, it appears that while the FDA approved this drug to be marketed and sold in the U.S., it is not without required post-marketing research that must be conducted by the drug manufacturer by March 2022. The FDA calls these post-marketing commitments, and these are not rare. I don't have the statistics on how often these post-marketing commitments are issued along with the drug approval, but let's just say I have seen these quite a bit. Now, what I do find interesting to note is that while the post-marketing trial needs to be completed by the drug manufacturer by March 2022, the manufacturer does not need to submit the final report to the FDA until a full year later in March of 2023. So what it boils down to is that we're talking at least a full 5 years from now, 2018, before the public may know the results of the post-marketing clinical trial. A full 5 years before we may know how this new drug that was tested on, again, 348 patients, will react in whatever pool of the over 1 million people in the U.S. with melanoma that may be prescribed this brand new drug. Or rather, these two brand new drugs. Okay? Now, regardless of that, as patients and consumers, if you're prescribed this drug or know someone who's prescribed this drug, please emphasize to them or to yourself how important it is to report whatever undesired effects you're experiencing while taking this drug or these two new drugs. Even after taking these two new drugs to the FDA, because those reports to the FDA may provide more information about how well these drugs are performing on the market before the drug manufacturer will complete their post-marketing commitment or post-marketing clinical trial. And reporting those side effects from patients and consumers, families of patients or consumers, healthcare providers reporting those adverse drug reactions will be invaluable to public health. Now, if you're interested in reporting, and I do mention this information from time to time, and I'll continue to do it, but if you want to report, you can call the FDA at 1-800-332-1088. That's 1-800-332-1088. Or you can even go to the FDA's website at www.fda.gov/MedWatch. And I'll include a link to all of this in the show notes as well. So no need to worry about writing it down. You can always go back to our show note descriptions and just click on the links from there and gather the information. Okay, now let's move on from MEKTOVI and BRAFTOVI and on to the third drug that was released this week, at least as of the recording of this episode. It's called TPOXX, and that's T as in Tom, P as in Paul, O as in overprescribed, and double X. So TPOXX. And how appropriate of a name since the drug is meant to treat smallpox. So TPOXX is manufactured by a company called, I believe it's pronounced SIGA Technologies. I've never heard of them. But according to Wikipedia, SIGA was founded in 1995 and they're based in New York. And the company is known for its drug products that target therapies for things clearly like smallpox, Ebola, and other lethal disease-causing pathogens. Now, TPOXX was approved on July 13, and it was fast-tracked for approval based on successful animal studies involving monkeys and rabbits to test the effectiveness of the drug. So how well the drug worked was tested in these animal studies, and it was tested in over 400 healthy human adult volunteers in 12 sites in the U.S. for safety. So again, most drugs, they have to be released, and they have to be released based on successfully passing the test for efficacy, effectiveness, and safety. And so this drug was tested for both in two different types of ways. And unlike the melanoma drugs mentioned earlier, there was more representation of Black or African American patient populations in the drug trial snapshot. According to the drug trial snapshot, it reported that there were 311 subjects in the safety trial categorized as white, and 127 patients or subjects categorized as Black or African American, with 4 as Asian and 7 as other. But anyway, the side effects included possible lowering of blood sugar levels when co-administered with blood glucose lowering drug repaglinide. And I'd love to know more about that, but the snapshot doesn't really offer much detail beyond just that statement. And if you're wondering why a smallpox drug approval now, when smallpox was successfully eradicated worldwide by 1980, then the answer is fairly easily explainable, at least per more than one news report on this recent drug approval. And it boils down to America's being proactive with regards to potential biothreats from things like smallpox, particularly in the unlikely event that smallpox is used as a bioweapon. Now, with smallpox being highly contagious and with the absence of any therapeutic drugs to treat it, it appears that this drug is one that makes more sense than not. And do you agree? Well, check out the links I'm planning to include in the show notes, and you tell me what you think. Okay, thank you for listening to another episode of Overprescribed. Before you go, I just have 2 quick mentions. First and foremost, I want to give a quick shout out or a huge thank you to all of our listeners and all of our supporters on social media. We could not spread the messages and do this show without you, so thank you. The other thing I want to mention is if you are also interested in taking a look at FDA approval letters and doing a search for these FDA approval letters for not only new or novel medications, but also for any medication really that's on the market and being sold in the US, then I am going to include some instructions on how you can find those approval letters on our website at overprescribedpodcast.com. Again, that's overprescribedpodcast.com.